Panelists. It's an non-governmental organization that champions press freedom around the world. What we're going to do here today is sort of double-edged for me. It's going to be a bit of a difficult discussion for 1 hour about press freedom in Eritrea, one of the most difficult countries to be a journalist in the world, where CPJ consider it to be more censored than North Korea, a country that is just around the corner in our neighborhood. But at the same time, it's going to be the story of the people who continue to fight for press freedom, continue to tell the stories of journalists who are behind bars in that country. And it's that story gives me incredible hope that about the resiliency of humanity, about what we can do if we just, keep on pushing and trying to build the kind of world we want. So the structure of this is that I'll do a quick introduction of who we have, and who we have, I'm gonna make them stand because they're currently in the audience, but at some point they'll come to the front. And first, I'll start with my partner in crime. His name is Nduko Omatigera. Nduko, some of you who are Kenyan might be familiar with him, has a long history in human rights activism in Kenya. He's also, he doesn't want me to say this, but I'll say it. He's also a human rights and social justice educator, but he also happens to head the regional office of PEN International in Africa. Next is Vanessa, who doesn't want me to say this, but I'll say it anyway, but she's the youngest among us. Vanessa Tsahaya is an Eritrean Swedish human rights lawyer, activist, and filmmaker. She's the executive director of One Day Seyum, and when she speaks, she'll tell you a little bit about One Day Seyum and what it is, which is a lead. I'm going to skip that because she's going to say it herself. She has worked very, very hard, relentlessly, since she was very young, to campaign for the unconditional freedom of political prisoners in Eritrea. Among them are independent journalists, our colleagues, and writers and cultural figures. Yes, that's Vanessa. And the final but not least member of our panel is a woman who gives me a lot of hope in humanity and inspires me a lot. Her name is Yirgalem Fesea Mebratu. She's an award-winning Eritrean journalist, writer, and poet who has unfortunately been living in exile in Germany since 2018, and she'll talk a little bit more about this, following imprisonment in Eritrea. She has worked as an independent journalist, published poems in literary magazines, and she co-founded a literary club that operated in Eritrea between 2003 and 2009. So that's who's in our panel. We have other people with us in the room here who are simultaneously with us and not with us. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Nduko, who's going to tell us a little bit about who are these faces in the portraits. I'm sure some of you are wondering. So he's going to tell us a little bit about that. And then after that, we're going to hand over to Vanessa, who's going to talk about 25 years since the shutdown of independent media in Eritrea. And we're going to move on to discussion with Yirgalem. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nduko.
Thank you, Muthoki. Before I introduce our colleagues, I'd like to say just one thing about the organization I represent, PEN International. Internally, we like thinking that we could be the oldest non-governmental organization in the world. We've been in operation since 1921. Promoting the flourishing of literature, we think there is power in literature. Across society, across cultures. And our charter decrees that literature knows no frontier. And so it should not be arrested, it should not be repressed, it should be the common currency of all humanity. So we are anti-censorship and anti-repression of literature. We also defend freedom of expression for protecting writers at risk. And the broad definition of writers at PEN, when we started, writers were poets, essayists, and novelists, but we've expanded that to include all people who use the written word to express themselves. I'm going to introduce our session by introducing our empty chair. We have 12 empty chairs in front of us, and this is a short session that we do to honor writers and journalists who should otherwise be with us, but they cannot because they are imprisoned, because they are repressed, or some have been killed, and that's why they're not in the room. And so we reserve the seats to honor them, to honor the work that they do and what made them be a target of repression by authorities. And our empty chairs are a group of 12 Eritrean journalists and writers. And I'm going to read a citation that I will mention their names, all of them that are here, and you can follow on the screen as well. On 18th and 19th September 2001, Eritrean authorities launched a massive crackdown on government critics. Security forces rounded up a group of dissenting members of the ruling party on charges of committing crimes against national security and sovereignty. The group of politicians, popularly known as the G15, had earlier published an open letter in which they denounced abuse of office by the executive and called for peaceful democratic reforms. In the crackdown, the authorities also cracked down on Eritrean independent press. The weekly newspapers, Mekale, Setit, Sigene, Zemen, Wintana, Admas, and others were all closed down for publishing the G15 open letter and for conducting media interviews on the issues raised on the letter. On 21st of September 2001, 12 journalists, among others, all associated with the banned independent media outlets, were rounded up by security forces and detained. Some of these journalists are also writers, poets, translators, playwrights, comedians, songwriters, and art critics. And they include, and these are the names that I'm going to read. Emmanuel Asrat is a journalist, poet. Um, Dawit Habte Mikhail, Dawit Isaac, Fesehaye Yeshua Johannes, Matthews Habteb, Methane Haley, Saleh Wedi Ite Sefezab, Said Abdel Kadir, Said Idris Abu Are, Seyum Chesaye, Temesken Gebreyesus, and Yusuf Muhammad Ali. In September this year, it will be 25 years since they were all arbitrarily arrested, detained without trial, and held incommunicado from their families, from their colleagues, from the world. They have been held incommunicado, and their whereabouts, state of health, and well being or fate remain unknown to their families, friends, colleagues, and to the world. Over the years, there have been unverified as well as credible reports that several of these detainees may have died in custody due to ill treatment, torture, and neglect. But we choose to speak about them. We choose to tell their stories. We choose to refuse their erasure and their being hidden away with the hope that one day we will hear their voices again. Eritrea has persistently ignored calls by regional and international media, freedom and human rights organizations, from the families of our colleagues, as well as treaty bodies and mechanisms of the African Union and the United Nations for the authorities to fulfill their human rights obligations in this case of arbitrarily detained individuals and indeed their disappearance in prison. PEN International and other organizations, ICJ, RSF, and others, continue to demand for accountability from the Eritrean authorities on the collective case of the unlawfully detained writers and journalists. And that is the story that we're here to tell. And just to finish, can go to the last two slides. This year, we recognize them as the longest jailed writers and journalists in the world. And we are launching a campaign that runs until September to tell their story, to continue campaigning for them, and speaking to the Eritrean authorities, like speaking to the world, but we refuse to stop speaking because we know it irritates them. And you're welcome to scan the card that you've been handed. There's a QR code where you can access more information and stories about these writers. And we call on you, please do tell the world about them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that citation, Duko. I'm going to move on very quickly because I don't want to spend all the time speaking and hand it over to Vanessa. Vanessa, do you mind?
Thank you so much. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the context of Eritrea and who some of these individuals are. And then we're going to have a larger conversation with my dear friend and hero, Yirgalem. So it'll get hopefully a bit more interesting and personal, the more experiences and perspectives we can share. My name is Vanessa Tsahaya. I was born in Sweden, been living in London for the past 10 years, but in my heart and in my soul, I'm 100% Eritrean. My parents came to Sweden. They fled during the war for independence that we had for 30 years against Ethiopia. And I'm a part of a big generation of Eritreans who were born in the diaspora. We are almost 1/3 of the population at the time left the country, and they all had children. And then now, I guess my generation are having children. So we are a country that's split between the people living inside and the people living outside. And it has created a very unique Eritrean identity, I think, different from many other African countries where identity is a bit more rigorous, whereas we as Eritreans continue to strongly identify and feel very connected to our land. This has created a lot of problems as well, which I'll talk about very briefly. But Eritrea gained independence in 1991 and had hopes of becoming a strong democracy. It fought Africa's longest independence war. And it was a war that was driven with a very strong determination for justice, for its people, and self-determination. There was a feeling of feeling oppressed under the Ethiopian occupation and rule. So now finally we had our own country and we were going to have a brighter future. This was slowly kind of being taken away from the people. Each year after independence, less and less and less hope existed as people saw how the president that was our leader of our independence movement became the president, started slowly becoming a dictator. And this all kind of culminated 2001, September 18th, with a message on the radio, a simple message that just said, the free press has now been shut down temporarily. We'll let you know about any updates. And that is the last time we heard anything about any independent media in Eritrea. And I think I meet a lot of African journalists, and I will be specific to Africa here because we're all, siblings, we're on the same continent, and I feel like we should all know more about what's happening in our countries. And I'm always very shocked by the fact that people don't know that we don't have any independent media in Eritrea at all. I think we were the only country in Africa. Djibouti also doesn't have any independent media. So we're one of two, I guess, which doesn't make it much better. But it's a very unique, repressive situation. And if you look at all of these CPJ or RSF, they all consistently cite Eritrea as the worst country when it comes to press freedom. Sometimes it's North Korea, but oftentimes it's Eritrea or North Korea fighting who to be the worst, which is a terrible place to be at. And these individuals were part of that September 18th roundup. So what happened in September 18th was the fact that Eritrea and Ethiopia had gone to war after the independence war. So in 1998, Eritrea and Ethiopia went to war again. It was a brutal 2-year war. And when the war ended, Ethiopia refused to accept a border commission that the United Nations had established. And because of this, there was tension between the two countries. And the Eritrean government claimed that as long as there's tension, we can never establish democracy. We need to always be ready to fight off this enemy. And so the pretext that they used to shut down everything in the country was this war. And so on September 18th, 2001, they imprisoned all these individuals. They shut down the free press. They also imprisoned key politicians that had been a part of the government that criticized the president. And after September 2001, we have no idea where any of these people are. They have not been released. They have not been given a trial. Family members have not been able to visit them. We don't know where they're being held, and we don't even know if they're still alive. So this is the reality of journalism in Eritrea. And of course, journalism is just an introduction to the general society. Free press is usually the first one to go because it shines a light on what's going on in the country. And to me, what happened in 2001 isn't just about journalism. It was a gateway to become a dictatorship for the government to do whatever they want to its people. It was after the free press fell that all of these sweeping changes happened. It was after the free press fell that the university was shut down. It was after the free press fell that the elections were cancelled. It was after the free press fell that the parliament was shut down. It was after the free press fell that political parties, civil society, all of these things were banned. So without the free press, all of these things went virtually unnoticed, and there was no ability to protest or resist what was going on. Them getting imprisoned wasn't just to keep them quiet. It was also to set a very strong precedent of what happens if you dare to speak out. If you speak out in Eritrea today, you will get imprisoned. That's the only thing that awaits you. If you're lucky, you'll get released. But if you're considered to be a very high profile, or if you did something incredibly public, then you will never come out again. But in Eritrea, that's not the standard for getting imprisoned. You can think and get imprisoned. It's a joke people have in Eritrea. You think and you get imprisoned, but it's true. If they perceive you as someone who might do something or could be considered a threat, you'll get imprisoned. And I'm only speaking now about freedom of expression. People get imprisoned for many other reasons that have nothing to do with politics or freedom of expression, but just in the context of advocacy and activism, anyone who's considered to be a threat disappears in Eritrea. And knowing that could happen to you is already scary enough, but knowing the implications that will have on your family members, putting your family members, your loved ones through your disappearance is something a lot of people don't want to put them through, understandably. And so the price for resistance in Eritrea is so high that people choose not to do so anymore. And many people, can look at that and say, well, they should protest, they should resist. But we all have to look at ourselves as individuals and not just on them to say they should be risking their lives, they should be dying. Like, what are you willing to do for your rights and for your people? And I'm willing to do a lot, but I don't know if I'm willing to die, for example. And I think that's quite normal if we're going to be honest about our own kind of bravery. And that's the situation Eritreans have been put in. And the second thing too is, if you know that you're dying for something that's going to have a difference, maybe more people are willing to do it. But in Eritrea, people disappear and their names are forgotten. In Eritrea, people disappear and their work doesn't go anywhere. So you see that. You see these names, all of these names. Why would you join this list? For what? So that's the reality that the Eritrean government has created. And that's the reason for, in my opinion, and I think many people's opinion, that the Eritrean government became a dictatorship and have been able to sustain their dictatorship for such a long time. It's been 25 years this year since all of these individuals were taken, kidnapped, legally speaking, enforced disappearances. But it's been 35 years since the Eritrean government came to power, since we have been an independent country. And if you look at what the government has created, again, as a result of the complete lack of opposition, resistance, freedom of expression, free press, is a country anyone flees from that can. There's no one who stays in Eritrea because they want to. Anyone who can, who has the money, will leave. And even without a significant amount of money, you can flee in different ways. You can sneak out. You might get caught at the border. There's a shoot to kill policy at the border. If you're caught after they've shot at you, they take you to prison. After a few years, they might release you, and then you try to flee again. Most people who flee that route have been in prison 2 or 3 times before they make it out. When they make it out, they go to the region. We all know what's happening in the Horn of Africa. What's happening in Sudan, what's been happening in Ethiopia continues to happen. A war might be coming soon again in Kenya, in Uganda, in Egypt, in Libya. These are the places Eritreans are spread across. They are offered no protection. They're offered no rights. In fact, they're harassed, they're detained, many are deported. This is the future of our country, are being completely scattered, and our future has been stolen from us by our leader. So the truth about these journalists and about what happened in 2001 was a death sentence for the Eritrean future and for the generation born after independence. And that, for me, is why their stories are so important, is because they're not just individuals whose lives were taken from them, but their cases represent the larger tragedy of Eritrea. And that's why I think we should always talk about the journalist in the wider context of the crisis in the country. I have a personal connection as well. My uncle is one of these journalists, Sium Tsahaya, who's actually in the middle holding a camera. He was a very famous war photographer. He captured most of the Independence War. A lot of the footage, if you ever see it from the Independence War, came from him or came from people that he mentored. So he was already a known figure coming into an independent Eritrea. And when independence happened, he became the founding director of our television channel, Eri TV, which still is the only TV channel in the country because there's no independent media. And even state-wise, they only have one channel. He then left that position because of, different problems with the government already in early 90s, became a freelance journalist, and was a very outspoken critic from the very beginning. He actually was during the war as well. He used to criticize the independence movement and how they treated dissidents even then. And he was imprisoned even in the independence movement, as he's continued to be a strong voice for what he believed in. And I never met my uncle. I was born in Sweden. He was in prison when I was 5 years old. And during that period, there's a war going on, so we couldn't go visit our family, unfortunately. I only went in 2003 when he already was imprisoned. And my mom always said that when he was imprisoned, because the war ended in 2000, that's what inspired me to become an activist. I was living in Sweden, and I felt very, very, very strongly about what happened to him. Like, my mom told me about him as soon as he was imprisoned. She never cared. My dad was very upset, apparently, at the time that she was talking to me about such serious things, but my mom didn't really care about it. And I think for me, that's what radicalized me. And I understood as I grew older, the connection between these cases, all of them, and the overall situation happening in the country. And that's what, again, made it even more important to me. And so in high school, I started an organization called One Day Sium, named after Sium Tsahaya. And the goal was to continue his work, because I think what was heartbreaking for me was that they imprisoned all these people with the intention of shutting down dissidents in the country, and they succeeded because inside there's no resistance for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And in the diaspora, people are scared, and many, many people support the government, which is what I was kind of alluding to earlier when I was speaking about the strong connection that we feel to our country. A lot of people who left early still feel very strongly about the president. They have a strong fear of Ethiopia, and they are always constantly worried about national sovereignty and integrity, and therefore are willing to pay any price to protect that. But the price they're paying is in someone else's name, with someone else's body. And therefore, it's very easy to sit in Germany, in Sweden, United States, Canada, and say self-reliance or dignity to Eritrean, to our borders. Yes, we should go to war, we should fight, we should defend Eritrea, but they're not willing to fight themselves, and they would never send their children to fight in these wars or to go to prison or to be in national service, which I haven't even talked about, but we'll get to that too. So I started the organization in his name to mobilize people, to raise awareness, to make sure as well that these names were not forgotten. And since then, it's been almost 13 years now. We continued to grow. We're the largest human rights organization mobilizing people, mostly Eritreans, but also allies, anyone who cares about what's going on. And we campaign, we produce, wait, can I get my magazine, please? Thank you. We produce media. So this is our magazine, 2001 magazine, named after the year the free press was shut down. So it's in honor of that year. And I can flip through it. Maybe we can talk about it later in the panel. I don't know how much time I have left. Okay. And we do also a lot of capacity building work. So we work with young activists who have fled the country, because at the end of the day, our mission is towards Eritrea as a country, and the people is the country. And no matter where they are Eritreans. And so we want to preserve the future leaders of our country. And I mentioned earlier, in Eritrea, there's no university. And in Eritrea, as soon as you turn 17, 18, you do your final year in a place called Sawa, which is a national service camp. After national service, you're either, if you're lucky, you do a test, and if you score high enough, you get to go through a technical college. And if you don't score high enough, you go straight into the national service. National service is indefinite. You are working for the government almost for free for the rest of your life in any sector that they choose, in any city that they choose for you. And if you go through these technical colleges, which are universities, but they're not really, you get channeled back into the national service system just with a bit more abilities because you've received some technical skills. So at the end of the day, the future of any Eritrean young person is in the national service. Some of these people are also militarized and they have to fight. The future, essentially, of all Eritreans is to be slaves of the Eritrean government. They have been deprived of basic education, basic human rights. And within these national service sectors, depending on what you do specifically, some people work in mining companies, some people are working in offices. It really depends on your skills. You are also suffering a lot of abuses. And because of this, Eritreans flee. National service is the number one reason people leave the country. And so sometimes people say, oh, like, democracy isn't that important. You can't eat democracy, I think is what the expression people like to say. But I always like to say that, well, if you don't have democracy, then the government can just do whatever you want or whatever they want. And then you can't afford to eat food because the government will have policies that restrict your ability to do anything. And so in Eritrea, yes, you can't eat democracy, but because of the lack of democracy, you're forced to basically be a slave for the government, not have enough money for anything. Most family members in Eritrea, actually almost all, are dependent on family members abroad to survive. And so it's created a very dire socioeconomic situation that has forced countless people to flee. There's over 500,000 Eritreans registered as refugees right now. And that doesn't count the people who've already been accepted, who have status and have started their new lives abroad. What I'm trying to say is that what happened in 2001, and I think I've already said it, but I will continue to reinforce it. What happened to these journalists, what happened to the Free Press, September 18th, 2001, set the scene to the destruction of the country. And my goal as an activist and the goal of the organization is to continue their work to make sure that what happened in 2001 didn't stop these forces. And the ultimate goal is to protect the rights of Eritreans wherever they might be and to ensure that they have a safe, a dignified life anywhere in the world. And that's why our programs focus on all of these things, everything from campaigning for the release of these journalists, for the end of human rights abuses in Eritrea, for the protection of Eritrean refugees when they flee, to support Eritreans when they come out, to become strong activists, to fight back, to strengthen the movement, to produce these kind of materials and audio visuals, on social media and stuff, to teach people more about what's going on so we can become a stronger and more widespread movement. I've spoken a lot now, so I'm going to stop. And then there's going to be a panel, I think. If you have any questions, I guess we can do it then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I really recognize the generosity with which you share what must be a very difficult personal story. We're supposed to be doing sort of a panel discussion, but I'm actually going to be a dictator. Actually, that's not funny at all. But I'm going to sort of make an executive decision about this because I would like to have a brief discussion with Yirgalem and focus on Yirgalem for a couple of minutes. And we're going to hear, it's the same story, but there's so many facets of it. And I'm hoping, do you mind? We'll come into the front, Yirgalem. Can we have another microphone? I'm hoping that what Yirgalem will be able to do is to give us a very rare insider's perspective of some of what you've heard from some of the other speakers. Maybe we just step a little bit in the front. So I'm going to direct this discussion. Yirgalem, thank you so much for being here with us. Now, what most people in the room don't know is that this is the first time, I think, in 7 years, maybe almost 8 years, that you're stepping on. Is the microphone? Let me try. Okay. Can you guys hear her? Okay, so I'll repeat. What many people in the room might not know, or this is not really a room, but what many people in this space might not know is that it's the first time in 7 years that you're stepping on African soil. You're clearly African, you're Galam. So can you tell us how it is that, this has happened, that you haven't been here for 7 years? I'm assuming it's not because you don't like to be in Africa.
Yeah. First, thank you for having me here, and thank you for bringing this issue, part of African Media Festival. As I believe, they didn't get enough attention that deserves them. So thank you. I would like I would tell you that I'm grateful for doing that. And yes, it's more than 7 years that I didn't come to Africa. It has that your own place could be a safe place for you. So I was searching safety. So I was in Uganda for 8 months, but still not secure. So I still traveled to Germany 7 years ago. So it was exciting to back to Africa. And I wanted to tell you that when I left German at the airport, the officer asked me, "Where are you traveling to? Kenya, but not to Eritrea." I wish. I wish I could, but I'm not allowed to be in Eritrea. Not because I don't want. It's because I am not allowed to be there.
You've sort of mentioned these 8 months in Uganda over 7 years ago. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened before those 8 months? What was there before?
Before those 8 months, I was in Eritrea, but I was in prison for 6 years in Mysuru military camp. I was not allowed to be visited. Actually, I was the only woman among them, but we were 26 people, media who have media personalities. So I spent 6 years hard interrogated and tortured. I was in coma for some weeks because of the interrogation. So after I released in January 2015, I stayed for some time there and I tried to flood from Eritrea, and then I arrested again for 4 months. I used another way, and I could to flee to arrive to Uganda.
I have to say you're incredibly brave, not just for that journey, but for the fact that you can be with us here today and speak to us. And we really appreciate the generosity of your spirit. Yirgalam, I'm assuming when I look at you, and I've known you for a while, but I've spent a couple of hours over the last 2 days speaking to you. You don't seem like a criminal to me. So why would anyone send you? You're not a criminal from what I can tell. So why would anyone send you to prison for 7 years? Were you ever given a reason? Were you ever taken to court?
I wish if there was a reason to be arrested, but in Eritrea, any even remaining silent can be a reason to be arrested. So nowhere is safe in Eritrea. So I believe that they want to make me example for other people to fear them. But I believe I was not exceptional from the people were around me. So they want to make us example for the others, for the mass or for professionals around us.
There are very few people who remember the journalist behind us. Vanessa mentioned that her uncle is one of them. She's never met her uncle. Yilgarem, based on our conversations, I happen to know that you knew some of these individuals,
Yeah,
that they were your mentors.
yeah. Amaniel was my mentor. As I was young, as teenager, I started to contribute articles and poems to his newspaper, and I have met him so many times, and he invites me for coffee. For just he was my big brother and mentor as well. He's a poet. He was a co-founder of literature clubs, very known in Eritrea. So yeah, I was very close to Amaniel. And I have met Matthew was Makalih, and I have met him once, and his younger brother was a friend of mine. uh, Joshua, I have met him one day, and Medhani, he was working for Astadamena, and he was a lawyer, and he was table tennis champion. Yeah, and I have met him once, but surprisingly, the one who introduced me to him is now a supporter of the regime. She's serving the regime in diaspora. And yeah, Saeed, he was the youngest one among them when he was in prison. In prison. Yeah, the Dawit, I think he was the second youngest when he was in prison. And unfortunately, his daughter was born after 2 months of his imprisonment. And I had cappuccino with him, and then after so many years, I invite his daughter and to repeat that cappuccino with his daughter in German. Yeah, this is the people who I know in person, but they were not far from me because I was young, but they were very prominent people in the country. So in media, I know them, but in person, I know uh, most of them, I can say.
Sometimes when we are not directly involved in stories, it's easy to reduce people to names, to dates, to pictures like these ones that are frozen in time, 30 years old. If these people are alive, none of them look like this. So, Yergalam, I want to ask you, if you were to tell our audience today one thing that you want them to know about these people, what would you say?
Yeah, I feel I would repeat it because I feel that they didn't get attention, especially international community, international media. They don't give them enough attention that they deserve, because it is not only a professional case. This is against humanity. They are disappeared for 25 years. 25 years, a quarter of a century is many years, especially if those years are in restless suffering and with no hope. I want to encourage you to think a bed-sized room in your mind, and you are locked in this tiny room, not for days, not for weeks, for decades years. I have seen I think it's good example that I see in book fair in Sweden. They as Dawit is a Eritrean Swedish guy. He's very prominent person in Sweden. They built a library for him. They named road for him. They did a lot of things, but still they couldn't help him to be freed, unfortunately. But what they do, they bring cell that they think Dawit is in, and they invite people to try this cell. So I invite you guys to think or to bring yourself to this tiny cell. It happens to me for 2 years. No connection with outside. You are not allowed to be visited. You are not allowed to speak with the person even next to you. Even I know people who were arrested in Mysore with me. They block they because they don't speak so many years. So after they release it, they cannot speak. They cannot be heard when they speak. They lost their voices. So this is happening in Eritrea. It's not far from us, and I ask you guys to feel it, not to know it, to feel it. What if we were in their position? So if we didn't feel it, our struggle will not be succeeded. We need to feel it. The information is not enough. Knowing something is not enough. That I believe. Feeling is the most important thing. What if I had been in this position? So we need to struggle not only for them, it's for ourselves. Yeah, this is what I want to say. To say. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Yirgalem. I recognize the time, but I want us to sit with this for a moment because I think that's incredibly powerful. And as we do that, I'm going to ask the three of you to sit there because you're going to be answering questions from our audience. And I'm also going to ask questions of you. And I will similarly pose a call on the audience maybe to comment or to make additions to this discussion. Thank you so much, Yirgalem. The three of you mind? Thank you so much. Do we have a roving microphone? I'm going to say if you do have a question, please raise your hand. I will be posing my own questions. I already saw one. Please give a microphone to Rita. But as Rita, just as you do that, the question that keeps on ringing in my mind again and again, that I want all of you to answer, and the question which I'm sure many in the audience have is, it's been 25 years. You've alluded to this, Yirgalem, because you said we do this for ourselves in addition to for them. But why do you continue? It's been 25 years. For many of them, no information, suspicions that they might be dead. To be blunt, why?
Why I'm continuing talking about them? Yeah, I don't see the other option as an option. I feel like I don't have another option. This is a safe place that I should be. I have to talk about them because I feel that I'm doing that for myself. And sometimes I feel that I was being in prison for a reason, and I was released for a reason because people they usually ask me how I release it. So I don't know why. I don't know why I was in prison. I don't know why I release it. So I want to give a reason for my imprisonment. So if I didn't speak about them, I feel like I'm part of the guilty. So as I'm doing for myself, even sometimes when you be hopeless, you feel that hopeless sometimes. But I try to encourage myself. You have to do this because you were in prison for a reason.
Thank you. Can we go over to Rita, please?
Okay. Thank you. I just want to add a little bit of context. Again, not to take away, because to add, 2001 was also the year when Asmara University students protested. So we have G15, we have the Asmara University students, and all of these events were covered by all of these journalists who are our friends and our families. The last article written by Sium Tsahai for Satit was about the Asmara University protest and the arrest by the Eritrean government of the Asmara University students and the death of Asmara University students in the camps that they were taken to in the eastern lowlands under 45, 50-degree heat. Satit wrote that those Asmara University students who died in the camps because of heat exhaustion were killed. They were murdered. So that was his last article to actually call out the government for murder of protesting students. I think this is also an important contribution these people made, and describes the loss that we have because they were not there. Over and out.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pose another question to our guests. I don't want to call you panelists because I feel like that's so. I'm going to pose another question, but I want to throw something to the audience. There is something that Vanessa mentioned when she was giving our presentation about the knowledge, and I think it has been repeated again by Yirgalem, the knowledge that we have as a community of journalists in Africa specifically about what happened in Eritrea and what's going on. And I want you to think about it because I'm going to call on people, and I see my senior Bosire there. I'm going to call on specific people because I'm curious to also hear from your audience. How much of this is old news for you? How much is new for you? Has this been a learning opportunity? Or is it just a repetition of things that you already knew? I'm curious to hear from the audience because one of the goals that we have here today is to just make sure that these stories are told and that they're told repeatedly. So sit a little bit with that question as I come back to our discussants. Fonduko and for Vanessa, the lawyer, and Fonduko, the activist. I want you, because my question again is still about hope. And Yirgalem has told us from a very personal perspective why we must still continue speaking out. But I want you to reflect upon practically within the mechanisms that we have, judicial mechanisms in the region, the pressure points that we can push. What has been done? What can we actually do? And to also think about our audience, if there are practical steps that you think we should be pursuing. I'm going to throw it back to Nduko, who hasn't spoken in a while, and then I'll come to you, Vanessa. Thank you.
So for the last 25 years, every year, PEN International has engaged with the African Commission on these cases. Basically, is depositing statements. It's making demands of the treaty organization to play its role and put pressure on the Eritrean authorities to fulfill their obligations. And the African Commission has indeed responded, not once, not twice, but severally. They've given opinions, they've considered the facts, and they have declared that the conditions under which our colleagues are being held amount to crimes against humanity. But the Eritrean state is impervious. As I said, it's like speaking to a wall. But then what we've learned over time is that dictatorship fears stories. And even when they pretend not to be listening, but when they know that you're approaching these treaty organizations, so we've advocated at the African Commission, but also at the UN Human Rights Council, when they know that you're bringing these cases before these mechanisms, they react with irritation, because sometimes we meet the state representatives in these forums. They're agitated. And that's the only time you hear them speaking about our colleagues. And it's denialism, it's dismissal. But if there's something I've learned from my activism is that even when we know that the dictatorship is not going to respond, we must do our role to continue telling stories. Because why journalism gets repressed, why critical art gets repressed, why books get censored or banned is because authoritarianism doesn't like stories, especially stories that are critical of its conduct, of its behavior. Unfortunately, we're also living at a time that multilateralism around the world is on a decline. There is not much attention that is given to, for example, the role of the United Nations, the African Union. When you look at anything that moves in the African Union, and when you look at who governs our countries, it's a club of dictators when they meet as the presidential summit. But still, we must not stop telling stories because we know that stories are a tool that they fear, that they respond to it. And one of the reasons why we have declined to be the ones to even express an opinion of the status of our colleagues is because it is incumbent on the jailers to tell us where are they, how are they doing, and it's up to us to continue demanding for their freedom, not from a position of naivety, but at the end of the day, whoever runs a country has the obligation for citizens. These are citizens of Eritrea. And so we'll keep knocking on those doors. We'll keep demanding accountability from the treaty bodies, and we'll continue advocating. And with a belief that those who are still with us, we will hear their words again.
Vanessa.
That was very beautiful. I think, is this on? Hello? No? Okay. I think with the Eritrean cases, it's horrible to say it so bluntly, but there's very little, I guess, legal or even political measures that can do much for the individuals. And that's why it's important, I think, when we speak about individuals, including Dawit Isaac, who I grew up hearing about in Sweden, as a part of the larger context. Like the only way for them to be released is for the dictatorship to fall. And I know some human rights organizations don't like to talk about state forms and democracy and stuff like that, but this is the only solution in Eritrea. These people will never be released as long as this president, this dictator, is still in power. And so I talk about the individual cases, and I know I keep talking about systematic issues because they're very important to the country and to me. But at the end of the day, these are individuals, and I think Yirgalem is like, that like we are lucky to have an example that we can look at as a person, and we understand the pain. It's not easy for her to be here. It's incredibly difficult. I can only imagine hearing this and reimagining, and it's not nice, but she has to, because it's the only way people can humanize these individuals. These individuals have been forgotten, and even when they're talked about, as Matoki said earlier, they're numbers or they're political prisoners, just like an abstract idea. And so we have to remember at the end of the day that these are individuals, and no matter if an African Commission ruling or an international court hearing or whatever will be possible for them, we have to keep talking about them. They can't be forgotten because they are still there. We don't know who's alive, who's died, but from all we know is that as long as we haven't seen any bodies, we will believe that they're alive. And so imagine you're imprisoned, and imagine you hear that someone's advocating for you, or that someone has remembered you, or that people still are like inspired by the work that you did, and that the work that put you in prison has led to something. We think that that matters, and that's why it's really important to continue speaking about these individuals. And there were a few Swedish journalists I remember growing up, who were in prison in Ethiopia for a few, like half a year or something. But they always said they continued to be advocates for other journalists after they got released, because they remembered how strong those like moments were when they found out that there were people speaking about them. They said it meant more to them than any food that they received, any books that they were given, anything materially was not important compared to being remembered and being spoken about. And so therefore, I think no matter how less like unlikely it is that advocacy will get them out right now, that is still important for them as individuals. But then in terms of practical matters, I believe we need to continue advocating against dictatorship. It's the only way.
Thank you. I want some people in the audience that I would put them on the spot, including my senior, Bosire. I do want you to contribute to the discussion, please.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Momo. And, I'm listening to their testimonies. These are heart-wrenching. I see the pain still act on your face. Vanessa, an uncle you've not met. And for me, I'm seeing those, they're not empty chairs. In Africa, they're never empty spaces. You're born and you live. They're not just professionals, but these are human beings who are professionals, human beings who have families, who have connections, who have spirits, and they deserve to be heard. For me, the most important story here, out of this festival that I've just been around, this is where the story is. We must begin to tell this story. You must never say whether they're alive or dead. They must speak from if they're not alive, they must speak from their graves, wherever they are. If they're in prison, their voices must be heard from the prison walls. Just wanted to know from you, has there been even a note from any one of them, that even a word of, just a note scribbled on anything else, something that can keep giving us hope? And I want to commend you for speaking out. Continue speaking. It's never say that you're going to remain silent. And I think for me, Mudoki, this is what we take. I know at the time how passionate you are. And I think I want to urge you, take this passion higher and galvanize the voices. The problem is that the African story about our own plight has hardly been told by us. I think it's time for us to own this story, own them. For me, the names, I think we need to run them now. And for me, there's nothing that is going to be about this African Media Festival 2026 without this. This is where our voices must rally. For me, a professional, these are human beings. There are human beings who are suffering for crimes that they've done. You've posed a question, you don't know why you are in prison. And you might never know why you are in prison, except the person who put you in prison, who knows, who conjured up the crime. My heart goes out to you, to all of us, and particularly to all these faces. I see them alive staring at us. They're not just photos for me. They're just human beings. In whatever state they are, they're human beings. And we must speak out as journalists. We must take this story. We must turn it into a campaign that beyond just saying they will be released, we must put action. I've heard about the problem in Eritrea, but I didn't know the depth of the problem. And I'm glad I came. Nduko, thanks. I'm glad I met you and you mentioned that this session was on and I've come. As a journalist, I'll want more information. I am going to do a story what I can in my own space, that I use all the space that I've got, all the energy to speak out to them. We must take this case beyond just calling out. We have representatives of the Eritrean government here. We must take this as a campaign. Mudoki, this is for me. You know, you stood up for me when I was in trouble. I know you will do this for all of us. Do them. And for me, I think we just need to stand up and honor these gentlemen and the people there. I think the room just needs to stand up. and for honor them and put them in our hearts and say a word that they will come home. Their voices will be heard beyond the prison walls, and wherever they are, we shall continue to hear their voices. It is heartbreaking, but it is. The honor we can give them is just to say, we shall never give up wherever they are. We shall do what? We must speak out, continue to speak out until we know where they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Basir. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for even just getting on your feet. It's really powerful. Basir has given assignments, but he has also made promises. And there are witnesses to those promises. So we will mutually keep those promises. I want to throw back to our discussants about the question that has been asked about evidence, because I think that's very important, what bits of information we've had over the years. But I want the audience to sit with two questions as we hear from our discussants again. And one of the dangers of working in advocacy or being an activist is that sometimes we can exist in our silos. We can think we know how things are done. We can think we know what to do. But as Kenya showed us, has shown us repeatedly over the last 2 years, the people know what to do, and especially the young people. And the activists, the people who are working in advocacy, often the best thing we can do is listen and follow. So I want you to just sit with it and think about what you've heard here today. And think about, is there something that you would tell the room, tell us who are working on this situation that we could do differently, that we could pursue, or an idea that you have? Just sit with that. And if you feel empowered to share after they speak, or if you want to approach us privately, that's also fine. The other thing I want you to sit with is, we've talked about how Eritrea is often compared unfavorably to North Korea. CPJ for a long time has published a list of most censored nations, and it's usually Eritrea, then North Korea. But sometimes it's easy to think about extreme examples and to sit in comfort and think, we're fine. This is not happening here. We have not been compared unfavorably to North Korea. We're in Nairobi, we're in Kenya. But I think sometimes even the extremes can be more familiar than you think. And I want you to think about parallels from what you've heard here today. Is there anything that's familiar? Is there anything that's familiar from your life? I don't know if everyone here is a journalist, artist, media person, activist. Are there familiar things? I know we're talking about journalists detained for 25 years incommunicado. And maybe that's not something that you confront in your daily lives, but are there elements of this story that are familiar? And if you feel empowered to share at the end of this, please feel free. And if you also want to approach us later, that's fine, because I think it's in the discussions of those, similarities and differences that we can also grow in our activism, grow in our efforts to build, essentially, because what we're trying to build is a free world for those who will follow us. Now, coming back to you, what have we had over the years? What have we not had over the years? And I'm going to start with Yirgalem because she hasn't spoken for a while.
Unfortunately, we couldn't see any sign of, if I got your question correct.
So the question from Mr. Basir was, what information, if any, has come out? Like even a note scribbled, a message sent out over the years?
No, there is no sign and rumors, even rumors to get information from that prison. First of all, we don't know where their whereabouts. Even we don't know are they alive or not. And it is the very famous and it's secret prison. Even I don't know where exactly the Eritrea is. Eritrea is very small country, but I don't know where exactly the Eritrea is. So there is no information about. It's difficult to get information, even from the whole country. Let me tell you that after I released it from prison, my brothers were not at home at that time. They were fled already to Europe, and for 3.5 years, I couldn't tell them how was the what I passed through, because I feel that the government spied the telephones. There is no internet access. We cannot speak openly. Families cannot speak about their beloved ones. They even asking and talking about those people is a crime by itself. So even maybe families can get some info. They will not talk about that. Talking about them and asking about them is a crime. So there is no, we don't have the latest information was before 15 years or something. The guard, one guy who was guard in the prison was fled from that place, and he was interviewed by Elsa Churum, I guess. So that was the information, the latest, 15 years ago. Yeah.
There's a question. Tesfalem, do you want to interject now? Or
I mean, most recently, we heard that the Swedish delegation, for the first time, they visited Eritrea, and they were discussing about David Yisak, I think, as far as I know. If you heard a little bit detailed.
She didn't want to speak what they discuss about.
But they were discussing about David.
Yeah, we heard that in general information, but I know nothing about that. I have contacts with maybe Vanessa can be informed than me, but we know nothing about that. She didn't speak about that. Just she was asked if she had news. She said, I guess, yes, I discussed with them, but she's alive. He is, she said that he's alive so far. So, yeah, that's.
And I think that's very important. Whether or not we know all the evidence, if there's someone saying that they're alive, then they're worth fighting for every single day. I'm just going to ask one of you to comment on this because we're bad on time and I do want to give the audience one last go. So I'm going to give it to Vanessa actually. On the question of evidence, information.
Oh, no, there's like, as Yirgalm already said, specifically the people who were taken around that time are held incommunicado. So there's no letters or photos or anything coming out from where they are. The only thing we have are these prison guards, 3, I think, if I'm not mistaken, who have spoken about the conditions, 2 from Aira Aira, and then essentially what happened was they were taken in Asmara in 2001. There was a hunger strike in early 2002, and that's when they disappeared from the capital city. Before then, we knew they were held at a police station, and then after that, that's when they disappeared essentially. And we know, I think they were taken to another prison before being taken to Aira Aira, but we don't know what prison that was because they were taken to Aira Aira in 2003, which means there's a whole year that we don't know where they were. But no information is coming out. Only these stories that these prison guards have shared, and even they are contested. Some of the person that she mentioned 15 years ago, not everyone believes. Not all of the organizations have verified it. So you hold on to the tiny bits of pieces of information that you get for screening, and hopefully can touch people's hearts. So I hope it comes out next year. We'll see. But yeah, if you're interested, let me know and we can hopefully do some screenings together.
We'll look forward to it and hopefully we'll screen it in Nairobi also. To the audience, I had asked you to sit with 2 things. Does this sound familiar? And also, what do you think we should be doing differently? What do you think we should be doing better? I don't want to have those long, awkward silences where you wait for someone to lift their hands. So I'll give it a couple of seconds. If you are empowered, if you feel that you want to speak, please raise your hand and we'll give the mic to you. Or you can also approach us later. I saw someone nodding when we asked, does this sound familiar? And I'm looking at you from the corner of my eye, if you know you are nodding. But go ahead, Catherine, also.
I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for sharing your stories, keeping their stories alive. I mean, this is all so heartbreaking. We're just discussing with Sam here. We thought we knew Eritrea. We just realized we are just getting started. So thank you for bringing this awareness to us, for reminding us why it's important journalism stays alive, why it's important that we keep on speaking up, even when we don't know what will happen. And back to your question, is it all familiar? We all know. We all know as Kenyans what's ahead, what's at stake. Thank you for reminding us to protect what's important. Yeah, I don't know what was the other question.
I've also forgot. It was. Is it? Is it familiar? And do you have feedback for us, which you can also provide later to
Yes,
save us blushes? But if you want to share now,
Sorry? Someone wants to share.
No, for me, I think there was a comment about documentaries, and I think we'll talk later about that. My name is Sam. I work at Africa Uncensored. We do in-depth and investigative documentaries. Thank you.
thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes,
Okay.
the person I was looking at from the corner of my eye. Please.
First of all, I'm very grateful for the insights I've learned today. I didn't know Eritrea apart from the history I learned in school. And I'm coming out of this session enlightened, informed, and motivated. And as Kenyans, the first question you ask, and how can you, what's the feedback you can use? So as Kenyans, Gen Z in particular, we have been very vocal on social media. I understand that Eritrea doesn't have that freedom, but how is CPJ and PEN International utilizing social media for awareness? Because before this meeting, I didn't know anything about Eritrea or the cases of inhuman that is going on in Eritrea. So how are you going about that? That's my question. Back to you.
I have a social media manager who I wish was here, but this is really good feedback because it suggests that we're not doing it well enough, and that we could all do better. And especially with the communities and audiences we target, just to I see you, Aaron. I'm really sorry, Aaron. This is important. But especially with the communities that we target, because I think for a long time, we've tended to think about advocacy on African issues as Western facing. But I think what we've been able to demonstrate over the last 2 or so years with the various youth movements across the continent is that there's a lot of power in the people here, and that, and also, just a very obvious lesson that change must come from within. So which audiences are you targeting, and how are you communicating these stories? Are you making them African stories? Eritrean stories, yes, but also African stories. So this is really good feedback that I appreciate.
Yeah, the last question you asked, mine is just to echo what she said. Yeah, we know we are treading on thin waters here in Kenya, and thank you for raising your voices. Thank you for reminding us what's at stake. And mine is just to emphasize to the Kenyans here, millennials and Gen Z, if there's anyone in the room. Yeah. So mine is just to emphasize what our freedom of speech and our freedom of speech is very, very crucial and very important. We have to maintain it with all we've got, because once we lose it, we lose it. And we're going to fight for it like Eritrea is doing. And thank you for the good work that you're sharing, PEN International, for trying to air their voices. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Rita, I see you, but there's a man there who's not happy with me. Aaron, can I? Yeah, please, Rita, just for a few seconds. This is Aaron.
Thank you, Erin.
I just want to make a Sanctuary Foundation. I want to make a plea and an advocacy that because of all the things that we have heard today, that is very important for Kenya to enhance the registration process and the protection processes for refugees from the Eastern Horn of Africa. At the moment, Kenya is very privileged. It's an island in the midst of chaos. And we need our Kenyan brothers and sisters to welcome brothers and sisters from the Eastern Horn and to protect.
Thank you so much, Rita. On that, I'm going to call it and say thank you so much for everyone who came, stayed, listened, engaged. If you didn't get a chance to speak on the microphone, or if you were very shy, you've seen our faces. We're going to be around for a little bit while. If you want to approach us and have conversation, feel free to do so. Please, can we have a very, very loud Kenyan hand of applause for our discussants, please? Yes, and Duku says if you want to like take pictures of the photos, the more people see their faces, the better. So if you want to take pictures of them, with them, feel free to do that. I think I was supposed to ask you guys for feedback. Was there going to be like a QR code on the... Are we doing the QR code for the feedback on the screen? Please stay around. There's a mug in it for you, based on how the feedback goes. It's an exceptional mug. It's so exceptional. Actually, I haven't been allowed to see it. Um, take one. Oh, while seated. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we should. Yeah. But we should sit because so that they can see the picture. And then I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for the QR code. Aaron, your feedback give us a living. Oh, it's not happening. Okay, so now this is your chance. Once in a lifetime, an exceptional mug. Huh? You want it? Okay, Vanessa will have it. No. You're going. Does anyone, yay, if Vanessa should have the mug?
That's why I thought we were like fighting for it.
Everyone, and a clap for yourself for lasting a whole day in this cold weather when you could have been home drinking tea. Thank you so much.